What does it take to put together a live TV taping with over 40 musicians on stage and only having a few weeks to do so? You'll find out exactly how that happened and what the process looked like when I interviewed my good friend Keith Smith on today's episode of Behind the Spacebar. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Behind the Spacebar. This is the podcast for folks that want to perform on stage with Ableton Live. If that's you, you're in the right place. If this is your first time, welcome. If you're a returning listener or viewer, then welcome back. Now, if you've been kind of following me through the past few months, you've heard me mention glimpses and bits and portions of this event I was a part of in November of 2022. So I was asked to do playback for this live TV taping and actually ended up doing one the night before in the same venue. Well, the person that asked me to be a part of that was my very good friend Keith Smith. As Keith and I talked, we discovered we've been friends almost 20 years in this episode, which is nuts. It makes me feel very, very old. But Keith is one of my oldest, dearest friends, and my family and I have the privilege of getting to see him about once a year as he comes through town with an artist that he plays for. And it's such a joy. I mean, we spend a couple hours together eating dinner, grabbing a coffee, sometimes a late night in and out. And it's always so much fun. But I had a blast in this episode interviewing Keith. This is the first interview we've done in this iteration of Behind the Spacebar. And I hope to do more of these. But we talk about Keith's role in this Christmas special, his role as a music producer, as music director, how it all came together, how he sold it to the company that put this together, and how he managed over 40 musicians on stage at once, which is crazy. And the craziest part of all this is he only had a few weeks to make this happen. So we talk about the process leading up to the event. We talk about why he brought me in. We talk about day of, what that was like. And all along the way, you'll hear some really, really good, wise words from someone who's been in the music industry for a very, very long time. If you don't know Keith, Keith is a singer-songwriter. He is a musician. He plays basically every instrument on the face of the planet, and that's not an exaggeration. He's an amazing horn player, horn arranger, producer, just excellent all-around guy. And he does a lot in the CCM music space, but even if that's not your vibe, if that's not your type of music, you'll take a lot from this episode. A lot about how to succeed, how to use different skills to succeed. Plus, I asked Keith a question I'm going to ask every future guest. What's one thing that he does better than almost anyone else that he knows? And so I think you're going to be really interested in his response and what he said. Plus, again, hearing what it took for this event to happen. So dive into this episode. I'll be back at the end of our interview. You're going to love it. Keith is such a great friend. Enjoy. Keith, hey, thanks for hanging out, man.
Hey, how you doing?
I am doing well. We're recording this post-Christmas, so my belly is full. And we're about to head into New Year's, so it's about to get even fuller. So
nice.
we chose a good lull.
I've lost 3 pounds, which means I'm doing Christmas wrong. I don't know how it's
yeah,
possible.
So you're not doing something right here, man. We're gonna have to talk. We'll talk about that after the call. Yeah. So I want to hit you with a very, very difficult question up front before we talk about this fun event that we were both a part of. I'm going to start doing more interviews on Behind the Spacebar this year. And I always want to ask people this question. You're the first one. So if it goes awful, I'll never ask anyone else again. But
love it.
What would you say is your unfair advantage or something that you feel like you are better at than almost anyone else you meet, or something that comes effortlessly to you that you would attribute to your success, your career, kind of where you are currently?
Oh man, it sounded easy at first, and then you said more things, and I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, from a skills standpoint, I mean, horns and horn writing and horn arranging, that's the most unique thing that I do, the thing that few others do. I actually have a pretty good memory for music and patterns and things like that. And I would say just on the whole, that's probably the thing that I can transcribe a chart fast. I have good relative pitch. I seem to be able to kind of find, like, if my ability to remember an arrangement is probably from like years of marching band and goofy, nerdy things like that. But my ability to kind of pick up a progression and notice how the arrangement flows. Oh, there's a bar missing the second time around. I can seem to kind of organize those things in my mind fairly quick. And even when someone's asking for an arrangement tweak, or can we take these four bars out, I seem to be able to understand what they mean rather quickly. And I think that has served me every day pretty well.
Yeah. I mean, in this field, like just the idea of working quickly, I feel like is an essential task, to whatever you're doing.
Yeah. And to not get flustered, you know, and to let it shake you in the middle of something that inside might be very frustrating.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and we'll maybe dig into, I definitely want to talk about like the emotional state of what you had during this event that we were part of, which will be really fun. But so before we dive in, obviously we've been friends for, I'm afraid to do the math because it'll age both of us, but
I think it's actually legit coming up on 20 years.
I know, and that doesn't feel right when you say that. I'm like, no, it's like maybe 10. If I had to guess, I would have said 10, but I think you're right. I think it's been about 20 years, which is shocking. So obviously, I know who you are. I know the plethora of instruments you play and skills you have. But for people that are brand new listening to the podcast or new to the community, tell us a little bit of what you do, and then we'll segue into like that role, the role that you played for this event as well too.
Yeah, I like to kind of say that some days it feels like I do a million different things, and then some days the exact same things feel like I do one thing. And what I mean by that is it's all musical, it's all creative, and in that sense it feels like I do one thing every day, but it takes so many different forms that some days it feels like I just so scattered. And so, I was the musical producer and an executive producer on this show we just did, which I know we'll talk about. On the day-to-day, I'm a songwriter and a music producer for my wife, Tasha Layton, and for other artists. I'm a music director at churches sometimes, and for events, I'm a horn arranger, and I'm in Toby Mac's band and have been for 7 years. And, so all session musician, like I said, it's all these different kind of things, but there's like a thread that runs through all of it that kind of makes it somewhat similar.
Yeah, that's great. And I feel like we could talk a lot on the importance of going deep on a skill, but also being like wide enough versed, in multiple instruments or multiple skills or whatever that, and I think you're a perfect example of that, of like being able to step into different things. And I'll ask you this question that I promise we'll get into like the heart of what we did this for, but do you feel like, knowing your personality, would you be bored if you were just Keith the horn guy, or Keith the MD, or Keith the songwriter?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think I would be. And that's why I think Keith the musician, I think is more fun, and this day was one thing, this day was the next, and it keeps it feeling fresh, but I'm still applying all the same rules. But I do think on the whole, I would get bored in probably the same way that I couldn't picture myself having a desk job. I think that would be tough. Even like Keith, the music director at a church, where I loved that job. I would really want a church that I would serve at full time to have different hats that I could wear, in order to stay fresh, to stay fresh. I think that's one of maybe the main point of that. If I weren't doing as many different things, I feel like one of them would suffer, because
that's good.
Me stepping out of producer role and into horn arranger role, working for another producer, sharpens my producer skills, and vice versa. If I weren't a songwriter, my production skills would suffer. And if I weren't a songwriter, my ability to arrange appropriate horns for someone else's song would suffer. I know lots of arrangers or even instrumental producers who think from an instrumental mind can't remember that there's a song they're trying to produce,
That's
and
really
so
good.
and I've been guilty of that in the past, for sure.
And that gives you such this is like a buzzword, but that gives you such empathy for whatever situation you're in, to view it from the producer standpoint that just hired you, that it's not about the best horn arrangement ever. It's about the best thing that serves the song in that moment at the particular time.
We just did a Christmas tour, and I was the music director for Tasha, for John Reddick, and for Brandon Heath. And the production manager was Brenton Miles, who runs front of house and was production manager for Carrie Job. But before he did all that, he was a front man for a band, and he's a songwriter. And before that, he was a drummer. And we honestly had some technical issues that came from the company that we got our sound from. And his ability to empathize with us, the musicians, to know that what it felt like to be under those technical things. I mean, he just thrived in that situation, knowing what it felt like to be in our shoes, and me having somewhat of a ability to sit outside of the band spot. We worked really well in that instance, and it could have been a very tense situation. So empathy in that way, yes, absolutely.
That's great. Well, we got to get to the meat of what we're talking about. Otherwise, all of our kids will rebel and come pull us away.
Right.
So I was a part of this event that you talked about, the different roles you served in. And I'll have you repeat that here in a second. But tell us what the event was. And you mentioned, the different roles you were. Say those again, but let us know what that entailed. And then we'll start to really break this down. And then I'll talk about the part I played in the whole thing.
Yeah. So my wife, like I said, is Tasha Layton. She's had some success at radio, and K-Love has K-Love On Demand, which is their kind of Hulu streaming service. And they came to Tasha and said, hey, we want to green light this Christmas special with you and Michael Tate. And we said, that's great, so long as you know that we're going to put 40 musicians on a stage, and we want costume changes, and it became this so much bigger thing than they had even thought they had said yes to, and to the point where we had to go to the record label and ask for them to cover all the musicians, because that wasn't in their budget. They were willing to do it. They said, we just need to be able to afford to do it.
Yeah. And you said, was it 40 musicians in total? Is that what it ended up being?
It was about 40. Yeah, if there was a guest musician on stage, like Danny Goki was one of the features, I think there was 40 musicians, background vocalists, strings, big band, rhythm section, 3 background vocalists, conductor, the whole thing. It was really fun,
That's awesome. And how far out in advance from the event, was this green lit and that you're going for it and things are happening?
We were producing another special for K-Love On Demand. It's called Boundless. It's a process for walking with the Holy Spirit through trauma that Tasha does on K-Love On Demand. Right in the middle of shooting it, on August 2nd, they came to us and said, hey, we're going to green light this special. And knowing what I just told you, they did not know. They did not know we wanted to fill the stage with musicians and do all this. So to them, they maybe think that's plenty of time. And many of who are probably listening to the podcast and watching this video know from doing Christmas specials at churches or whatever you may do, that is not a lot of time to pull all this kind of thing off. And so we recorded it. What was it? Was it November 21st? Something like that?
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah. And so we did not have all that much time to pull this off. And especially that was the very first day. We didn't start talking about it in detail for several weeks. And so I just started to try to get ahead of it and making Dropbox folders full of information and just started to think. And one of the downfalls of me wearing so many hats is I'm sitting there in the early days going, how many hats am I going to have to wear to pull this off? And so, part of that was why you got a phone call from me going, okay, I can run tracks. I can do Ableton. I can run playback, but can I do that well while I'm on stage running a bunch of musicians? And I kind of went, I think I'd better call someone who can specialize in this for us, or we could have a really bad situation on our hands.
How important, being there, I think I know the answer to this question, but how important on that day was the fact, or let's say even leading up to that day, was the fact that you were able to hand off things that you're fully capable and highly talented and able to do?
Well, it was easy in the fact that I love being the least talented person in the room. I humbly, I say sometimes I'm not, and that's okay too, but knowing that as decent as I am at playback, one of my friends from college is way better at me at that. So in that sense, it's way easier. And some of the benefits of passing off these different tasks. And some of them that I passed off was like, one of my better skills is as an arranger, and being able to write these charts and get these things ready and organize them into folders that people can access, and also needing to know when they've gotten an updated chart, that they don't miss that. You know, how do you formulate all those things to where people don't miss what they need to miss? And so I was like, man, I'll be the arranger. This is going to be great. But I know where my D-Day is. And the closer that I got, I was like, I have to pass some things off. So I just kind of always kind of calculating what I have to do. And when the end date was, okay, now's the time I have to pass off a chart to somebody else. Now's the time I have to call Will to do this, just knowing there's no way to get it done. And so, and I think that's worked fairly well to kind of go, okay, I'm going to do as much as I can, and be a good dad and all those kind of things. And at some point, no, it's time to expand the team and make less money. Sometimes that's the answer for that. And it's just necessary. And when I don't, at the end of a project like this, where I don't make much money because I put together the right team, I just know that I'm going to see dividends from that later down the road. That's worth it.
That has to take a lot of humility to put, I mean, it's back to where we started the conversation, to put the needs of the song, the needs of the artist, the needs of the event above you going, man, that would, a couple extra thousand would be really nice around Christmas time. That's got to take a bit of humility to go, what's best for the project right now is maybe not what's best for my pride, or best for like the thing I want right now.
I think sometimes that's it, and sometimes it might be the opposite, in that, man, I don't want to get to the end of this and look bad. That's, there's a healthy way to say that statement, and there's also a really unhealthy way, and I just kind of have to keep gut checking myself on. But also knowing, like, no one knows how much money I made at this. All they know is that a part of this crashed and burned or didn't go well. That's the part that maybe I'm protecting my ego and my pride more, and it's the right thing to, and I don't know how all those things work up in the brain with, chemicals firing and whatnot, but some of it's a little self-protection going, my reputation deems that I have to do this right, even if I don't make much money on it. And later on, I've gotten some big calls. I was a music producer on the People's Choice Awards in 2016, and just know that calls like that happen when I make the right decision on something else.
That's really good. So maybe a lesson for people out there listening is like, don't just get so narrowly focused on this one thing that you miss, like the grand vision of doing this one thing or passing this thing off, or maybe not going, I could do this and do that and do that. Like serving the moment really, really well. Who knows what that could lead to further down the road. Yeah.
And to know that, like, I mean, we'll talk about the process of going through this. There were things that you caught that I wouldn't have caught if I didn't have someone else on the team that were running through playback and were lining up bars with charts and things. And you would call me and say, hey, by the way, this looks wrong in the chart. Boom. All of a sudden, this process of team was way better for everybody. If you hadn't been there catching a few of those things, we, in the middle of a very stressful day of show situation, would have had some things to correct.
Yeah, that's good. So let's talk a little bit about that process. Let me talk from my perspective for a second, and then you fill in any gaps maybe before that, and then we'll walk to the day of the event and then the day of the event. So I think when I got the call from you and you said, hey, can you do this? And I said, yes, I can. And I started the process. If I remember correctly, I think it was about 20 days out from the event, maybe a little before. It wasn't.
Sounds about right. I had thrown it at you a little. We saw each other.
Yeah, that's right.
And we went to dinner. And I said, hey, I might need you for this, but that was probably 10 days before that. But it wasn't a minute since I got you. Yeah.
That's right.
But we didn't start work until probably, you're right, about 20 days out.
Yeah. And again, if people have never walked through that, you may go 20 days, that's a lot. Or if you've walked through it, you're like 20 days, and I think either way you look at that, it could be either side of this. So you brought me into the process, and I want to brag on you for a moment, because I am not naturally a organized person. I'm not naturally a prepared person. And I'll share this fever dream that I often have. And I realized as I was talking to my dad, like getting ready for this event, which I think was like a week before, I routinely have this dream in my life of waking up panicked in the middle of the night. And in the dream, I get hired for a gig and I show up to the gig. And now at this point in my career, I'm not playing guitar for the gig. I'm doing playback, but I'm like setting up for the gig. And as I'm setting up, the band's already on stage, like playing, and everyone's staring at me like, why are you taking so long? And I had a dream at some point in those 20 days of me showing up. This is really highly specific and weird, but I was at a youth group event, a church youth group event, setting up, and there was a band on stage, and I was getting the rig together or whatever. The band's already kind of playing, and in the front row are like the legends of playback, if you can call it that, and Mike and Pablo and Clayton are on the front row, and
that's an Avengers movie they're never going to make, but
that's right. They should. It's the movie we all needed, but we didn't realize we did. And so in the dream, the like worship leader is like, sorry, we're having problems with our redundant rig. It'll be just a moment. And I had to like go over to the playback people and go, no, it's not a problem with the redundant rig. It's blah, blah, blah. Regardless, I had this dream in the middle of like, I do not want to screw this up. I'm like terrified. I'm not going to be prepared. I have to say though, walking in at day 20, it was even, I think, ready at that point. You said, hey, I'm going to add you to this Dropbox folder. I get added to this Dropbox folder of like, all the songs are numbered, and it's like, here's raw stems, and here's charts, and here's original recordings, here's rehearsal tracks if we had them or whatever. And so preparation, I think on your part, to me, it felt like was something you intentionally spent a lot of time on. Mm-hmm. But I will say it helped me a whole lot. And I say all that to say, one, again, in the course, if people don't know this, there's a course where I walk through the whole thing. I share the process of formatting, and I walk through the Dropbox folder so you can actually see that structure if you're interested. Mm-hmm. I'll put a link in the show notes. But how important to you was that preparation? And what was your process leading up to me getting that call of like getting stuff together and getting stuff ready?
Well, the first part of this is just doing what I can with the information that I have. So I don't... Through this process, started all these producer meetings with Tasha and without Tasha, with management, to decide what are the songs we're doing, who are the guests on what songs. Where there were all these video transitions between things, and so all I knew early on were the songs that I was pretty certain from Tasha's vantage point that would be in the show. And so I don't have that much time. So what am I going to do? I'm going to do what I can do. And I start putting together a folder with the songs that I know are in the show. And again, we're talking about the versatility of things. The whole reason that I know to do some of the things that I do is because I've been the player getting a terrible Dropbox folder full of things that don't make sense. Yeah. And I also know that understanding, okay, all the songs are in this folder, and now I'm going to have to go to a PDF that has the song list and go, okay, what's the next song? Now I go search through the folder and go find the next song that I'm going to rehearse. And I was like, if I could help people move fast and also get used to the way songs feel to transition from one to the next, if I number these songs and I number the recordings and I number the charts, and so everything's the same way, and I could only do that once I got a show order.
Yeah.
And things like that. But I'm going to go ahead and start doing it. And how can I save people time? If people only have so much time to prepare, and we don't ultimately really have that much money, we didn't pay nothing. It was a decent rate for people, but it wasn't astronomical to where people are going to shut down their lives for 3 weeks and dive in and learn it. I have to save them time. I get a better product from them if I show them that I've put the time in. Like, what can I do to show them that I've honored them with my time to prepare these things, and their time has been honored, and they're going to want to give that back to me with honor the same way. I think that's a big deal. So yeah, that's what I did. What's anything that, well, I can say this, and I would guess a lot of MDs and people in these kinds of shoes think this way, and if they don't, they should. What could go wrong? And do I have a contingency plan for what could go wrong? Does it make sense if we have several of Tasha's songs are pitched down a half step? Is it causing a roadblock for people to have to rehearse the song in a different key than they're going to be in, when I could just pitch down a recording and they could have something to play along to? Yeah. Those kinds of things.
And I want to stress a point real quick. Like, particularly, let me throw this out to, not everyone in the crowd in the audience is doing this at a church as a worship leader. But this is something huge. You're working with like professional musicians in Nashville. We're not talking about people that have a day job and they sometimes play guitar. Like, you're going to that extreme of an effort to serve those people really well, to make their job easier. And I know for me, back when I was a worship leader, sometimes I would get an inflated sense of self where I'm like, it's a half step down. I mean, they can just play the song and like, what's the big deal? As opposed to doing that extra effort to like serve those people in love, to say, I want to show them that I care enough for them to really do the work and put in the extra effort. And again, you did that with like top of the top professional musicians in Nashville, not just anybody.
Yeah, and call it self-preservation. You know, you can not care about them. You should. You know, they can tell. People have great BS meters, whether they know it or not.
Yeah, that's good.
But I know through doing this enough that me not serving them well and giving what they need to prepare ultimately comes back to frustration for me in the middle of a rehearsal, or someone's not prepared and you make somebody look bad, and now all of a sudden they're starting to kind of stress out, and maybe their attitude changes, and now you got a personality issue. I mean, it can manifest in all kinds of ways that are subtle, and you know, maybe none of those things happen when you leave the track in the original key, but maybe it does. Maybe somebody gets embarrassed because they didn't realize that it was down a half step, and now they're struggling over a lead line and they feel embarrassed. And some people act out when they feel embarrassed, and all of a sudden you're having to go side stage and deal. You know, it's just, like I said, call it self-preservation if you want. All of this stuff is going to make your life easier in the end.
Yeah, that's really good. So let's talk some technicalities here, some process stuff, and you jump in, correct me if I'm wrong from anything on your end. But so I come in about 20 days out from the event. I get this very well organized Dropbox folder. We've got each song individually separated out. And within most of those, and again, I think you said this really well. You're like, I gave you the info I had. And I think up until like a week out, there were a couple songs we didn't know, were those really going to be the song, or is this artist doing that or whatever. So again, we're working with the info we had, but you had uploaded stems into that folder, what I would call raw stems, and had a chart of some sort for most things, had an original song for most things. What I started doing, well, let me ask you this before I get into what I did process. Were those stems that you went out and got from an artist? Did you render those from a project? How did you get that content? Because there were, was it 4 different artists?
5.
5, okay.
Yep.
So 5 different artists. How did you get all those stems? Did you make those projects? Where did that stuff come from?
Everything we used were from the original masters.
Okay.
And, you know, 75% of the show I probably produced. You know, one of them was Tasha and Brandon Heath's God Made a Way, which I didn't write or produce, but was in the middle of, you know, with the producer giving feedback and everything. Like, and I knew how to get those files, you know.
Okay.
And I will do this if I absolutely have to. I'm not going to create stems from a producer's file. I really want the mixer's file. And so one of the things I started doing is going to song credits. There was, so one kind of interesting example was that Michael Tate had a version of the Christmas song that he recorded at Air Studios in London in 2002, I think. Oh my gosh. You know, wow. And so no one knew where these files were. And, you know, we've got 16 strings on stage, but there's percussionists there, there's woodwinds and oboes, and our sax players in the big band, I hired them specifically because they can play clarinet and bass clarinet and flute. I knew I had a woodwind section, but I don't have French horns. I don't have a lot of the things that would make the track feel like it ought to feel. So I finally got to the arranger. I got the arrangement of the song. I found out this Steve Beischer engineered it. Ultimately, after like a week and a half, the label didn't have it because they weren't the label at that time. Like, I'm actually calling people at Air Studios and saying, do you guys archive these things? Where can I get them? Because the mix was done on the floor that day. They recorded everything was live, including the vocal, and it was all mixed. They did a few rides after the orchestra left. They printed a 2-track, and that was it. So there was no mix. Gosh. There's no mix or stems to pull from. So finally, after about a week and a half, I get a hold of Steve Beischer, and he says, I think I have those files, but they're on a computer I haven't used in 12 years.
Oh my gosh.
So he said, give me a couple days and let me go see if it's true. So I gave him a couple days and called him. He said, hey, I have them. And he sent me a Pro Tools session that was, I mean, just these beautiful tracks from one of the greatest studios in the world. And in that instance, I actually did pull them up and recreate. And it was actually fun because I was getting I didn't treat it like I was creating stems just for fun. I treated it like I was mixing these, 96K files from this amazing studio. And,
that's awesome.
I actually liked my mix better at the end, but I did it to create those stems. And then I was able to turn it around and go to the record label and say, hey, found them. Here's these. I created stems for them and kind of turn all that into them.
That's great.
But that was the most aggressive. And that was the most aggressive song with tempo changes and stuff too, because it wasn't cut to click, wasn't cut to anything.
That song, when you look at the course outline of that and the videos I uploaded, because I did a screen capture of every single song in the process of that. I think there's probably 3 different videos, and at the end of one video, after about an hour and a half, I'm like, I'm going to take a break and we'll come back tomorrow and finish this. That was a beast. But so that's amazing. So you went and gathered stems from everybody from original records, had to track stuff down. That story's amazing.
Yeah, so I found the mixers, and some of them I was like, I know all these guys like friends. I say, hey, I know you mixed God Made a Way. Can you go ahead and send me those? And they, when they know what it is, yeah, absolutely. They'll, hey, I've talked to the A&R guy. He said he can get to me next week. Can you go ahead and send these to me? And it's a lot of relationships and things like that.
That's great. Yeah, and that's a whole nother podcast episode, the power and importance of relationships. But I digress. So we get these beautiful stems uploaded in Dropbox. I grab those raw stems. I format them in Ableton Live the way that I teach, using the 3-part framework for using tracks. We get all that stuff uploaded. I very quickly throughout the process realized this is, and I think we even talked about this from the beginning, and I mentioned this, but I said this is chart heavy. And one of the most important things is going to be our communication working well so that you can say start on measure 37. And if you've ever done this before, those of you listening, and you've seen an Ableton Live set of multiple songs, you know that measure 37 for song 4 is not measure 37 in Ableton. It's like measure 467. So, I created a measures track and then ended up creating a measures template, which I'll put the link in the show notes to that you can download. But that was a huge piece of getting the communication clear. And you kind of teased this earlier, but one of the really important steps for me, and I think I started to do this, and then you and I had a conversation where you're like, I need you to make sure this stuff matches because this is going to be super important. But I started pulling up, and again, you can see this in the course where I did this on my song. I pulled up the Ableton session, I pulled up the PDF chart, and I went, okay, does this match? Does this match? There's one song where it's like, hey, I think there's a measure 2/4 here. I know there is, but it's not on the chart, but I just want to make sure.
That was one of the big ones you caught that had we not fixed that, we would have had a big problem on our hands.
Yeah. And I think for me, again, I don't have the experience you have as an arranger, but I do have the experience of a music director leading a rehearsal and knowing if we're not all together, that's a disaster. So I think I maybe even mentioned that I'm like, this is maybe a small thing because you play through it, but if everyone's staring at a chart, it's a huge thing,
Yep.
So we had that, there are a couple whatever things, but at that point we have a Ableton session and a chart that matches that I upload that back to Dropbox. I think we had one, maybe 2 conversations where I said, hey, here's a question, and you answered or said, I don't have those stems yet, or we don't know the song yet, or I don't know the artist, or yeah, that's a great catch. How beneficial was that process? I mean, that was a 10-15 minute conversation. It wasn't a long conversation, but how beneficial to you was that in that process as you're leading up to the event?
It's not just beneficial. The whole thing falls apart without that. Truly. And this comes from my recording of horns. I have rules when I'm writing, and some guys don't do this and they have ways to work around it. But when I'm recording horns for somebody, Pro Tools always matches my chart. Always, always, always. And there's been a few times where I didn't get it, and all you do is go into Pro Tools and make bar 3, bar 1. It's a real quick way to make them match up. But my other rule is no repeats. Never
huge.
any repeats. And there are ways to do repeats, and then you can do two measure numbers, like one on top of each other. So the top is the first time through it, and so if it's 25, but then the bottom it's 35, and that means that the bottom 35 matches. There's a way to notate it on the chart. Honestly, it's just a headache to me. I never use any repeats for that reason. But I know you're. Same thing for Ableton. If my chart had repeats, you have a way to notate that it's the second time through. There's two 25s, you know, and however you notate them. But literally, hey, we need to pick it up at bar 35. If I had to have my playback guy searching around and doing math to try to figure out, I mean, like you can speak to this. We had as many minutes to rehearse as there was music to play. Like there was no time to not have a process for that. Like I think the whole thing's hosed. Everyone's frustrated. This is not an enjoyable situation had we not done that.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I mean, it's huge. That's like that piece of doing the work on the front end to then make it to where in the moment, like those things are going to click and you're going to keep going. And I jokingly said in an email kind of promoting the course and recapping the event that and not just this event, every one of these events I've ever been a part of is always like, wait, hurry up, we're behind, make 5 changes, make them 5 minutes ago, and we're also 10 minutes behind, so hurry up, you know. And it's like, it's just, you've got to be able to work really quickly, you've got to keep your cool, you got to manage a lot of changes, it's a lot of stuff.
And again, my one thing is like, what could go wrong? You know, and do I have a contingency plan for it? Not, that probably won't go wrong. I'm gonna move on. Like you just can't. Yeah. You just have to know what could go wrong. Have I double checked these charts? Are they accurate? And then there might be some time where, hey, I'm gonna tell the brass to lay out on these. I have to remember, have it on a list that I'm gonna tell them to, hey guys, I want you to sit up bar 12 through 18. Not a giant deal. That takes me 2 seconds. It can be an instance where I have other things that are more important than doing that. But if I end up having time, or I have an assistant that I can give a list of things to do, man, it is going to save me time if I do those kinds of things.
That's really good. So we've done this work, and you tell me if I'm skipping over anything glaringly big that you're like, people should know about, but we get everything in sync. We, we're working back and forth. One thing you kind of threw out towards the end was rehearsal tracks with vocals, with lead vocal, without lead vocal. So we were rendering those towards the end. There were songs where, and this was beneficial to me to get those to you, because there were songs where you're like, hey, that click is off. Something's weird about that click. Or for this song in 6/8, I want the click like this, or I want that. And that, to me, saved time. We still made some of those changes in rehearsal, but that saved a lot of time, I think, in our communication, to where it's like, you kind of got a good idea of what I was giving you beforehand, before we got into actual day of rehearsal.
Yeah. I think those rehearsal tracks were first and foremost for the artists. The artist who's got their ears in, they need to know what to expect. Same thing. I'm trying to save time day of and keep them in their ability, in their zone, to be able to communicate well. You know, these are not notes they're singing, they're stories they're telling, and they're things they're trying to get across. And if that count off really threw me off, because these counts do happen in the middle of them singing words. Like, you know, have they been given a recording that shows them what to do? Have they been given an opportunity to call and tell me, hey, that cue doesn't feel right? No one did, but they need that opportunity. Hey, that feels really strange. That's not what I'm used to. Like Danny Goki sings Mary Did You Know, 15 times a year or more. And he has his own tracks and his own counts and cues off things that he's used to. And I do remember in the rehearsal, he went, oh, wow, that's different than mine. Yeah. Great. Okay. I'm good. And I don't want to catch them off guard. I want to make sure and I will say this to those of you that are music directors and worship leaders, use as few cues as you need. Like, I think it's just generally distracting. Whoever that lady is that's yelling at me during every song when I'm trying to play a ballad, and you're trying to lead worship, I don't know who she is, but I want to meet her, and I'm going to her house, and I want to talk about her tone, because she's just. Don't take
that tone with me, lady.
Don't take that tone with me. She's Karen for sure. Yes. But like to me, like the chorus always comes here. This is not a confusing thing. I do not need yelled that there's a chorus coming when the chorus always comes here. Yeah. I want, if there's a pre-chorus in one verse and not in another, man, cue me that there's a pre-chorus or cue me that the chorus comes, because I don't always know that. If there's a 2/4 bar, if there's something like, say, you know, it goes, I don't know how, and I'll butcher this, you know, nothing, be as simple as possible and no simpler. You know, that's what cues should be to me. And I just take out half of them. And if you can, do it. It'll also teach your team how to not rely on them when they don't need to. And it just also gives just a sense, hey, I trust you with this. I know you've done what you need to do, because there are people, I know them personally, and I've talked to them, and they don't know, oh, it's fine, I don't need to prepare this. That lady will tell me what to do next. No, like put the time in, you know, and so anyway, that's my food for thought, is as few accusers you really need.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good one. That's honestly a good takeaway. So we get to the day of the event. We recorded on a Monday, and that was an interesting thing for me, and this is a different story for another day. But I got a call, you know, I got 20 days on this one. I got a call 2 days before an event on Sunday that ended up doing playback for. Thankfully, there were far less tempo time signature changes for that event than there was for this one. But I was in the same, I mean, we both were, you and Tasha did a song that night, but we were in the same venue. And so my stuff was kind of already set up, ready to go, which was nice. Other than everything getting repatched, and my dream kind of came true because the band was on stage ready. And I was like, and no one could hear it, but it wasn't my fault. But I still was like, oh, that's a terrible feeling. But another story for another day. So we show up Monday to the venue, and walk everybody through. I mean, as briefly as you can, or as in depth as you want to, of kind of what the day of prep and flow of things up until the actual event felt like to you, and things that stick out in your brain. And I'll bring up a few things as well too.
Yeah. So all of scheduling this, like I said, it's the same production company. It's K-Love On Demand that's doing this K-Love 40th anniversary thing on Sunday night. And on Monday night, we're doing Tasha's event and Michael Tate's event. And so a lot of things are the same. A lot of things are different. And at this point, you really are putting yourself in everyone's shoes going, okay, I need more rehearsal, but can the artist stand that much rehearsal without getting worn out and hosing them for that night? How much time does audio actually need? Am I stressing anybody out with these requests? And so they're wanting us to get in as soon as possible. I didn't realize that we didn't end up doing an actual dress rehearsal period on the night. We ran it. We had a rehearsal length of like 2.5 hours and I had schedule on the left side, which I had to kind of keep. And I really pride myself on caring about that. You know, we say with things like the Hits Deep tour with Toby, like everyone's got to hit their mark on time or else it's a very long night, you know, and nothing will get you talked trash about. And I say trash very loosely, than going over your time. Yeah. You know, it's number one, it's just disrespectful if a promoter asks you to come in and you just don't seem to care about what they've asked for you. They have reasons. They're caring about more than just your thing. And, and so I was like, man, I'm going to stay on time for this rehearsal. And so it's making very broad stroke comments to everybody. Hey, cellos, we need to tighten that up. You guys can't hear the click, but you're dragging in this section. Guys, and it's just making saying as much with as little as you can with as little time to go. And we're getting into some of these things with our conductor, and hey, we telling you, Will, hey, we need to take the eighth note subdivision out there. Let's program that to say this, and just little ways that we're trying to tweak up tracks a little bit as we go. That's, that you have in your format to be able to adjust those things quickly. Because it's not like you aren't going to have things to check. That's why you try to get all these other things ahead of time, because there's always still stuff to do. Yeah. We finish during and do a quick dinner, and then we're at showtime, having never done a full dress rehearsal. And that's because I think they spent hundreds of thousands of dollars between these two shows. And so, and yet they're still making concessions. They would have loved 8 cameras and we shot it with 6. Yeah. They would have loved to have a full other day in this facility to do a full dress rehearsal, and you just can't. So you just know that everyone's a pro and you're going to do the best you can, and you're going to fly, and it's kind of fun that way too. There's a lot of adrenaline associated with it, and okay, take what you can get, keep a good attitude, keep treating people well, keep thanking them for their part in it, and there you go.
That's really good. And I think I want to stress, and I mentioned this in the course, and everybody can see all that, but, rehearsal was so much of, like you said, of we're on a song. Hey, stop that. Hey, Will, can we get a count into this section? Can we take this from just quarters and eighths to, just quarter click? Can we stop the click early so that Brandon can do this? We can conduct this way. We can do that. There were a lot of changes every song. And like you said, that's even with all the preparation we did up front, and we did that, and we formatted things, and I structured things a certain way so that we had that flexibility. This was an interesting experience for me because this was actually, as I'm thinking about it, other than the night before, this is the first time I've done playback in a way where I am not the person determining when to start tracks. And so that was an interesting role. Talk a little bit about, once we got into the event, one, from your perspective, what you were doing, and then our communication back and forth and how that worked.
15 minutes before the show, the producer said, "Hey, this show better than anyone. Can you decide when we trigger songs?" And that was an instance where I should have found a kind way to say no, because I didn't have the information. So literally 15 minutes before the show, and this is a good example of everyone's doing their best. No one is treating anyone poorly, but a decision all of a sudden put me in a state of anxiety that I didn't need 15 minutes before the show, and. Part of I want to go, man, I could do anything. You tell me what to do and I'm going to do it. Put me in, coach. That's just me in general. You tell me I've got 2 weeks to do this Christmas show and I still would have tried to figure out a way to do the same thing. Yeah. So all of a sudden, 15 minutes before the show, I'm in the production's office saying, "Hey, I need to copy the script." And I'm realizing during the show, I knew this, but I'm realizing the value of this is a TV taping that we're doing. And so there are going to be starts and stops, but I don't even have the producers in my ear like they do in the truck talking to one another to know what's up. So I'm literally just trying to watch a teleprompter where there's teleprompter issues and read a script. And I'm also supposed to be playing trumpet at the same time. And I just should have said, "Hey man, I really need to have someone else do this." And because I did agree, I do know this stuff better, the musical portion of this, better than anyone in the room did. Yeah. But when I got into the show and realized that the transitions weren't as critical as I thought they were, that if there was 10 extra seconds between the dialogue and when the song started in a TV side of things, that's not a big deal. They just cut it out. And so I was thinking, man, I've got to make sure we get this song perfectly cut into the next one. And I probably should be the one to say that. When I got 15 minutes in the show and realized that wasn't even really necessary, I was especially going, shoot, I should have made sure someone else did this job, because it was stressful and it kind of it was not what was probably needed. And someone else could have done that just fine. Yeah.
Yeah, you were wearing a lot of hats. You were playing trumpet. You were music directing. There's stories I won't tell on camera of funny things that happened with you in the talkback mic with artists. Miscues.
Well, I'll go ahead and tell you. My talkback was in the artist's ears, and they're up there trying to talk, and I'm trying to say something to Will or someone, and all of a sudden one of the artists turns back and says, "Yeah, what?" I was like, "Oh no!"
Yeah, that one. And then I'll just say, I won't say who it was, but there was a song where you sang the line of what was happening, and someone in the band was obviously a little on edge and started the song as if that was the start of the song, and it made the artist go, "What?" So
the artist was supposed to sing a line and the band responded to it. That's how the song started. It didn't start with any intro. Yeah. So I went, just to kind of, "Hey, here's the line you're about to hear the artist say," said it into the mic, and the musician who was supposed to cue it went, Ta-da! It was really funny. I forgot about that.
That was, I love telling my kids that story. That was really, really fun. So I know we've got super, super long, and I know your kids are probably busting your door down to get dinner as mine are. But I got to say first, Keith, thank you for having me out for the event. It was super, super fun. It was great working. I was texting and talking to my wife after the event, and it made me super grateful for your friendship, because that would be an event that would be a lot less fun to do if like one of my very best friends wasn't there with me and wasn't there leading it, And I even told you beforehand, I said, listen, dude, we're really good friends. And if in the moment you need to yell something at me, I'm not going to break down and make us have a 15-minute counseling session to work through it. I can take it. And so I think just the relationship we had of working together for that was really fun to me. And I think you modeled that really well for everyone else there, like how to treat and care well for people. So thank you for having me out for the event. It was super, super fun. And I'm going to put links in the show notes to where you can go watch it. At least right now, my family and I sat down and watched it, which was really, really fun. And
it came out really good. I'm really proud of it. Yeah,
it did. And the moments where mistakes were made were clearly cut out, but it was fun to fill that in with director's commentary from my family. But yeah, this is a super, super fun event. So Keith, congrats to you on putting all this together. I mean, I don't know that anyone will know the amount of effort it comes across, you can see it, but like so much stuff that you did for that event, and did it really, really well, either by delegating or doing it yourself was really, really killer.
Well, it was a really cool, I really cherish full circle moments, and doing this with you was one of those, to kind of go and like, man, some of us are really out here still doing it, and the chance to do it together was a bigger deal than maybe some people would realize, but it was to me anyway.
I think so too, and it makes me realize how old I'm getting, which is a little sad. So I don't know how well you can see the white in the beard. I can see yours, but I got a couple years behind you, so you're leading the way for me. But Keith, man, this was awesome. Thanks for doing this. Thanks for being a great friend, and I love every year our dinners together when you guys come through town, and so I hope we can keep that tradition up. But for anyone that wants to stay in touch, or maybe anyone's listening and going, hey, I have a major award show or Christmas special that I'd like you to produce 3 weeks ahead of time, where can people find out more about what you're up to and get in touch?
Yeah, I'm really blessed to be able to kind of take the stuff I'm really passionate about doing. And one of the things that I think is great, when I say yes to something, it really means that I'm passionate about doing it. Because my wife's career kind of takes up so much time. So I've been able to kind of say, no, I really can only do that if I love it. So producing records and stuff, I still love to do, especially church records and things. But and also just love the mentoring part and the getting to know people. So if anybody is out for a Toby Mac show and you want to try to get together for lunch or something, or breakfast or coffee, I can tend to be up for something like that. But yeah, websites KeithEveretteSmith.com and Instagram producer Keith1. And yeah, I mean, just a Google search, I'm sure we'll find someone with my name and ask them if it's me.
Get to some Smith, and they'll get to you eventually. So
that's right.
Keith, man, thanks again, dude. This was great, super, super fun, and thanks for being here.
Yeah, man, take it easy.
All right, so I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Keith. Again, like I said, Keith is such a good friend. I really enjoyed this conversation. I had texted him and said, hey, can we talk for like 15 to 20 minutes? That was the intent of this to be a short conversation. It just kept going and kept going. And you could tell there are different points in there where I wanted to dive a little deeper, ask more questions, and I had to hold back because we were getting close to an hour as is. But as Keith mentioned, if you want to reach out to him while he's on tour or just see what he's up to, I've included links in the show notes of this episode in the description of this video if you're watching on YouTube. If you enjoyed this, do me a favor, give us a thumbs up over on YouTube, give us a rating and review on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you're listening to this podcast. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode of Behind the Spacebar. And again, like I said, I want to introduce more interviews to the podcast. There's still a lot I want to say individually, but I really, really enjoy sitting down with folks and having conversations, because there's always something we can learn from someone else, no matter their experience, no matter our skill set. There's always more we can learn, and I just enjoy that process, talking to people, pulling out things that I can apply to my own life and my own career. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you want to see more content like this and you're over on YouTube, then hit subscribe, enable the bell icon. And if you're interested in diving deeper into learning how to use Ableton Live on stage, then head to FromStudio2Stage.com/subscribe and check out everything I have there as a part of the From Studio to Stage community. Thanks so much for watching. Have a fantastic rest of your week, and we'll see you next week. Take care, everybody. Bye.